Welcome to the Baseball Happenings podcast. Our guest this episode is the Mike Sommer, waxpackhero.com. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Mike, you're really active in the card community, and tonight we wanted to get your insight on how you feel the current sports card market is affected by what's going on with the coronavirus.
Sure, yeah. I think there's a couple different angles to it, and to some extent, I think there are definitely some impacts that we've seen through the coronavirus. But I think another angle is, there's a lot that is continuing the way that it's been in the past, and really, I guess from my perspective, before all of this hit, cards, collecting cards, trading cards, organizing your cards. People going through cards was a form of escape for them. They'd go to work, they'd have a tough day, they'd come home and they'd have a little bit of an escape, and get into their cards and sort cards and reflect on some of the memories that they had in the past, from the days of their youth and collecting and all of that type of stuff. And I think to some extent we're seeing a lot of that continuing to happen now. It may not be coming home, from work in the same way to provide that escape, but it's still providing an escape from all of the stresses and the concerns and the things like that we're seeing due to Corona. And so people are continuing to use their collections and use the cards that they've got to think back on happier times and reminisce on happier times.
I'm seeing a lot of interesting connections of people digging through their collections and either pulling up special cards or revisiting cards that maybe they didn't spend as much time with now, or like you said, going back to cards of their youth. I'm really seeing a lot more interest in that in the past few weeks.
Yeah, and even me personally, I like to buy and sell collections. And so this has provided a chance to really kind of dig in and finalize the sorting process on a lot of the collections that I purchased. And, there's things that I had set aside because I knew that it was going to be something special, or that there was some good stuff in a box, and just kind of going through that and digging through that has provided me a lot of entertainment too, and even made some new connections via trades with some people that I'd never really interacted with before. But when I tweeted out, some of the stuff that I'd found, there'd be people that say, "Hey, I'm still looking for a few cards from that set. If you've got any doubles, I'd love to trade for them," and worked out a few trades that way. And so, I think that's been pretty neat. And, the other piece that I think this has done is highlighted how, for some people, who have more of the flipping or the business acumen side of cards, has provided them a way to continue to supplement their income. There's people who have used cards as a side hustle that at this point, we're still able to ship things, via USPS. And there's been people that have been able to maybe supplement some of the loss of income that they've experienced from their day job through the buying and selling of cards. And so I think to some extent we've seen that it's provided somewhat of a safety net, for other people, which is great. It's a great added benefit for those that are in that type of situation too.
Yeah. I think depending on which side of the coin you're on, there definitely could be some arbitrage opportunities from here for people who might have to be hard luck selling, and then at the same time, there's still a swath of the country that, is still getting their paychecks and are looking to buy. And so I think there could be opportunities, that way when you talk about flipping. But, one of the things I remember like Gary Vaynerchuk talking about over the last few years, and, a lot of people associating him with flipping sports cards, but in reality, this has been going on, since the hobby became a business. Those new to the collecting community that got in solely with the idea to flip, and then now the economy in the last month has done, a 180. What do you see for those types that kind of got in looking to, jump on the train?
Yeah, I think it's it reinforces that jumping in blindly is never a good idea. And I think this has kind of highlighted that doing some background research, making sure you understand what it is you're getting yourself into is as important as ever, today, especially what we find ourselves in. But I think at the same time, for whatever reason, there's a lot of cards, and some of the research that I've seen via a couple websites that are kind of focused on that financial aspect, that sales have been kind of as strong as ever, even in the midst of all this at this point. And I don't know if that's because some people are still kind of not thinking still spending money they shouldn't be spending on cards, or if it's because people are truly identifying opportunities to continue to buy and sell and find markets for those cards that are allowing them to continue to turn them, and make a little extra money. It's probably realistically somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
But it is kind of an interesting case study that I think we might see play out. I'm curious to know personally, is this a reflection of the background of the people in the community, right? Is the cards that we're continuing to see sell, are we seeing that because of the demographic makeup of the collectors, and
Right.
there's still ones who have jobs, and there's a greater percentage of the card collecting community that is still in essential roles or in roles that they're able to work from home and still have their normal paychecks coming in, or is it something completely different that we don't really understand maybe why the card market hasn't taken quite a hit yet.
Yeah, I'd love to throw that question by Ivan. Watch from the breaks. He's very in
Yep.
tune to finances, and I think he'd have some words, on that. One thing that opened up my eyes this week, I had some remnants of a coworker's collection that I had put up, and they were unopened packs of these oversized Dunwich champions, and I just put up a big lot of it, and I said, all right, 10 packs for $5, because I couldn't figure out how to, off them, and immediately within a day, I had 10 different people wanting, quantity of the packs, and that really opened up my eyes to saying hey, there's still a lot of people at our home that want something to mess with, not a high cost. So for them to, shell out 5, 10, 15 bucks to have some old funky packs, they were more than willing to do that, because this was something I think to break up the monotony of staying home. And so I'm interested to see where the cards are going to be part of this stay at home economy for the time being.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I know Big Shep, Tim Shepler from the About the Cards podcast was talking about how he was in touch with his local card shop, who I think has been able to do some curbside service and that type of thing where they're at. And he had typically had an entire, table full of junk wax boxes, and some guy came in or placed an order, call an order, and essentially said, I'll buy the whole thing just because I'm looking for some stuff to do. And these aren't expensive cards at all, but it'll give me a lot of fun, and a way to pass the time over these next few weeks. And so, I think there is something to, people still wanting to kind of go to those cards as a way to pass the time and have some fun and do something enjoyable. And it doesn't have to be a focus on all high-end stuff. It can be some of those low-end and low-dollar type packs and boxes as well.
What are you seeing trending? I know that you're very prolific on the website Sports Lots. What do you see trending in terms of collector interest within the last few months?
Yeah, so I've still, the month of March was still a very good month for me on ComC. Check out my cards, so comc.com as well as Sportlots. On Sportlots in particular, it was kind of the stuff that I always see. There was a lot of orders from people that appeared to be set collectors, as well as as player collectors, I don't know that I noticed anything change, significantly from the types of orders that I was receiving. And I'd say the same thing on ComC. It's just kind of across the board sales from things that are on the lower end of the spectrum on up to some of the $10 and $15 type cards that I've got on that site. And so I don't know that I've necessarily noticed a shift in the types of cards or the types of players or anything like that over these last 4 to 6 weeks.
Right. I guess it could be a function of people, like you said earlier, taking a hard look at their collections, or it's the time to get organized and pick up those straggling cards that they need for their sets, because they can really sit and take a look at what they have. I just
Yep.
read an article that was here on Blowout from April 3rd, saying that Topps has announced delays to 11 upcoming products.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know their main office is here in New York City. And then their products are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where they're packaged and distributed. And both places are under quote-unquote lockdown conditions. As this plays forward, if Topps has to delay their products, what effect do you think that'll have on the hobby, and where do you think collectors will turn?
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic. So Cartamundi is the company that does the printing for the majority of the Panini and Topps cards there in Texas, and that is the facility that was shut down. And so they pretty much shifted their release dates to be determined, a TBD date for almost everything past April. If it wasn't already packed and ready to go, it's on to be determined status. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Now, the Topps on demand products, so Topps Now, Topps Living, the Star Wars Living, a lot of the things that are on demand are shipped out of and printed in a facility in Florida, I believe, and that is still operational. And so that business, as I understand it, is continuing to be produced and be shipped. As I understand it, the Panini Instant and some of the Panini on-demand products are also produced in a different facility, and so I think those products are also still continuing to be shipped. I think if this continues to go on, it will be interesting to see how that all plays out. As I understand it, that manufacturing company, that printer, Cartamundi, they also have facilities in a few other states as well as international locations. And so I think, if it looks like it's going to be delayed for the foreseeable future, or it's going to turn into a long-term shutdown in Texas, I think there's legitimate questions on will they be able to ship or shift that production to one of Cartamundi's other facilities to start that back up. Or will we be in a situation where Topps and Panini have to cut product? Because even if things get back to normal here in a few months, will the compression of all of those products into a much more tight release window be too much for collectors to be able to handle and afford, as that all gets rolled out? And so it will be interesting to see what happens if we get into that situation where instead of 25 or 30 different releases per sport, we have to start cutting, of what is actually going to come out. And so that's going to be something that we've not really seen in the card industry, in any recent history, really. And so, there's just so many firsts that we're seeing because of this, coronavirus situation.
Topps has this intricate relationship with Major League Baseball. And I know Topps has like a lot of other products. They deal with Star Wars and WWE, but they have, a very rich contract with MLB. And I wonder the depths of the products potentially not going out if this does carry on really long. How that's going to affect the agreement that they have in place, because MLB is having its own issues right now, trying to figure out
Yep.
if they're going to have a season. right? And then there's like other domino effects. So like if MLB's not playing, are people still going to be interested in cards of like guys who aren't playing like at all?
Yeah, I think we'll see. You know, from Topps' perspective, you know, I don't think there will be a damaged relationship with MLB because of this, because you know nobody could do it differently, right?
Right.
You know, everybody's in that same situation. I think from a what will people collect perspective, I think you're going to see a lot of older wax boxes start to dry up. You know, I think people will say, well, what else is available? Maybe I can find some 2017 product still, or some 2010 product, or even some of that junk wax stuff that we were talking about before, right? And people, I think, will still have an itch to open some new cards, even if those new cards are 20 or 30 years old. And I think we'll see that supply of older wax that people have been holding continue to dry up even more. You know, it'll be interesting to see on blowout cards or DA Card World some of the retail clearance type stuff that they've got available. You know, do those sales start to tick up, and you know, what exactly or how exactly will things play out? You know,
There's a lot of
the
unknowns right now in the world.
yeah, yeah, and the business mind of me is can't wait to see this. You know, see what happens. It's like I think back to my days in college and some of the Harvard business reviews that we did in some of my business management classes. But this is going to be a case study in, you know, made ripe for those types of things that colleges and universities are going to be studying the impacts of this for years into the future.
Right. And here we are looking at our small corner of sports card collecting. But meanwhile, this is playing out over larger industries, you know, with exponential numbers compared to what goes on with sports cards.
Yeah, yeah, it's it's fascinating. I mean, even in the insurance industry, right? You know, you have all of these people staying home, not driving, and the rates of accidents and things like that are going down. You know, all around the country. You know, what's that going to mean? You know, it's not a unique, or it's a unique situation, but there's wide ranging impacts. You know, it's just all across the board. You know, it's having all kinds of interesting impacts.
Speaking of hobby impact, I was having a conversation with another colleague earlier today, and we were discussing the possibility of the National actually going off. Do you see a scenario where the National could happen in 2020?
Wow. Could I envision them trying to pull it off? Sure. Can I envision a scenario where it will be business as usual with the same attendance that they would have expected or that they would have seen if none of this would have happened? Oh, not a chance. You know, I think there's a small chance that it could happen in its normal scheduled time. I think there's a better chance that it could be possibly rescheduled for later in the summer or fall. But I don't think there's any chance that they will see kind of business as usual.
Yeah, we were saying that I think it would be hard for that many collectors to be willing to get together, you know, in a place where it requires you to violate all kinds of quote unquote social distancing, you know, in order for everybody to get a look at the, you know, merchandise.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
I think that's dead on.
so, Mike, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your site, Wax Pack Hero, and your podcast that you started, the Sports Card Minute?
Sure. Yeah. So I collected as a kid, and I took about a 20-year hiatus, starting with kind of when I was going off to college. And when I came back to collecting in around 2015, so much had changed since the 90s when I left. And I had to do a lot of work to kind of get back up to speed on all of the differences and nuances that we're experiencing now. And so as I did that, it kind of prompted me to think about, boy, it'd be nice if there was a resource that could help get people up to speed, because I know there's more people like me who are coming back to the hobby and getting back into collecting, and that's kind of really what prompted me to start the blog at Waxback Hero. And I did that for a couple of years and was having a lot of fun with it and getting a chance to connect and meet a lot of people and interact on social media, on Twitter and Facebook and that type of thing. And about a year ago, or a little over a year ago, I had a chance to start to be an occasional guest host on the About the Cards podcast.
Great guys.
And yeah, they're great. And that really kind of prompted me to say, hey, this is a lot of fun. And I wonder if I could start my own, podcast. And as I kind of noodled around with that idea and what angle could I take, because I didn't want to just replicate, what other people were doing, I said, one of the things I enjoy most about getting back into the hobby and what I do now, because I've got a little bit of an entrepreneurial streak, is to kind of talk about how I have a self-sustaining hobby. And I've been successful at being able to buy and sell cards and generate enough profit from that to cover the cost of the cards that I want to keep for my own hobby. And I've been able to kind of have that self-sustaining hobby. And so I said, well, maybe I can start a podcast with a theme that would be combining both the business and hobby side of collecting cards. And so that's kind of the angle that I took with the podcast. And so I try to have, evergreen content, I'd call it. I talk about buying and selling on specific platforms. I talk about most effective and efficient ways to ship cards via UPS, whether that's through packages or whether that's through plain white envelopes. I talk about some of my favorite sets that I'm trying to collect. Today I just had an article or an episode that was kind of reminiscing about Topps Magazine, from 1990 and the first couple issues of Topps Magazine. And so I try to kind of have episodes that kind of alternate or combine both the hobby and business side of collecting, and work in some interviews with other collectors or other people that have some of that business focus too, and provide a different voice for it. And so it's just been a lot of fun to do so far, and I'm definitely glad I got started. And so I'm just having a ton of fun with both the website and the podcast.
My story is somewhat parallel. Around the same time I got back into the hobby and was able to start reviewing Topps' products shortly thereafter. And, after putting cards away for such a long time, I saw my content start to weave between like baseball history and then now also card collecting. So I've been able to merge, both things. But, to see like the Twitter sphere of like the card hobby and see it, there are many people that are still interested into it is inspiring, and it does make it fun, and it's an escape, I think, for many of us who are looking to get back towards something that was a vivid part of our youth.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and I think that's awesome when we can find an outlet to both relive those days of our youth, celebrate the sports that we love, and interact and build a community with people that we otherwise wouldn't get a chance to do that with. And so, with the writing that you do and the podcast that you've got, I think that's provided an awesome outlet in addition to, your normal day job, right? And the other interaction that people have been able to have. And I've found, that same thing. I have a handful of people locally that I know that actively collect cards, but the number of people that I've been able to meet and interact with online is just, exponentially higher than what I would otherwise have been able to do. And so it's just been a lot of fun to be able to get a chance to do that kind of stuff.
I completely agree. Mike, if people want to reach out to you via social media, what platforms are you active on, and where can they find you? I know, Twitter is the Mike Sommer, Sommer, but, fill in the readers and the rest of the places where they can find you.
Yeah, so Twitter, like you just mentioned, is great. Waxpackhero.com is my blog, and that's another great place to catch up on what is on my mind. You can also search Waxpack Hero on Facebook and Instagram as well. if you want to get a hold of me. And I even just started a TikTok account, Wax Pack Hero TikTok account, where I've got a few videos up at this point. But man, I'm just having fun trying to experiment with a few different things there. It's a little bit of a different platform, but it's been a lot of fun just to play around with and have some fun with. But
Yeah.
I try to be on about all of the different platforms, just because I love to learn and interact and reach as many different people as I can.
Thank you for joining us on the Baseball Happenings podcast. We'd love it if you'd rate, comment, and subscribe to us on whatever platform you're using to listen. And remember, until next time, keep swinging for the fences.